Hello, everybody. Welcome to your fact of the day. I'm going to be honest, at this point, it's kind of turned into like a fact every couple of days because, life. But I'm trying. I will get them out to you as often as I possibly can. As promised, today's is going to be on the history of coffee because I love coffee and am completely dependent on coffee, and especially lately, I feel like my life just isn't complete without at least 3 cups of coffee. So it was just one of those days. I put on sweatpants. I haven't taken them off. I have a headache. I have 16 people vying for my attention and not nearly enough time to give them. So yeah, I could use a pick-me-up. But I miss you guys and I love you guys. Let's talk about the history of coffee, shall we? So nobody knows exactly how or when coffee was discovered, although there are a lot of legends about its origins. Now, coffee grown worldwide can trace its heritage back centuries to ancient coffee forests on the Ethiopian plateau. Now, it is said there, the legend is that a goat herder by the name of Kaldi first discovered the potential of coffee beans. So the story goes that Kaldi discovered coffee after he noticed that after eating the berries from a certain tree, his goats became so energetic that they didn't want to sleep at night. So Kaldi went and reported his findings to the abbot of the local monastery, who made a drink with the berries and found that it kept him alert through the very long hours of evening prayer. The abbot then shared his discovery with other monks at the monastery, and knowledge of these energizing berries began to spread. So as the world continued to move east and coffee reached the Arabian Peninsula, it began a journey which would eventually bring coffee beans across the globe. Now, coffee cultivation and trade began on the Arabian Peninsula, and by the 15th century, coffee was being grown in the Yemeni desert, or not the desert, the Yemeni district. I just can't even with words today, you guys. It was grown in the Yemeni district of Arabia. I mean, I guess it's kind of deserty, but still. And by the 16th century, it was known in Persia, Egypt, Syria, and Turkey. Sorry, I do research on these things, and then I forget like half of what I've gone through. So coffee was not only enjoyed in homes, but it was also enjoyed in many of the public coffee houses called, and I had to write this one down because I don't know, called Cave Cane. I probably butchered that, and I'm sorry. Which began to appear in cities all across the Near East, and the popularity of coffee houses was unequaled, and people frequented them for all sorts of social activities. Now, not only did the patrons drink coffee and engage in conversation, but they also would listen to music or watch performers or play chess, and they would keep current with the news. So coffee houses quickly became such an important center for the exchange of information that they were often referred to as schools of the wise. Now, with thousands of pilgrims visiting the holy cities of Mecca each year from all across the world, knowledge of this wine of Arabia began to spread. So they called it the wine of Arabia. European travelers to the Near East would bring back stories of this weird, dark, black beverage, and by the 17th century, coffee had actually made its way through to Europe and was becoming pretty popular across that continent. Now, some people reacted to this new beverage with suspicion or fear, calling it the bitter invention of Satan, and the local clergy condemned coffee when it came to Venice in 1615, which is funny because it was originally discovered by a monastery in the first place, so hello hypocrisy, but that's just me. When it came to Venice in 1615, the controversy ended up being so great that Pope Clement the Eighth, Pope Clement the Eighth was asked to intervene, and he decided to taste the beverage for himself before making that decision. And he found the drink so satisfying that he actually gave it papal approval. So coffee has papal approval. Now, despite the controversy, coffee houses were quickly becoming centers of social activity and communication in the major cities of England, Austria, France, Germany, Holland. In England, penny universities sprang up. They were called penny universities because for the price of a penny, you could purchase a cup of coffee and engage in very stimulating conversation. Sounds like my kind of university. And then coffee actually began to replace the common breakfast drink beverage of the time, which was beer and wine. Yes, beer and wine for breakfast. Those who drank coffee instead of alcohol tended to start the day more alert and energized, and not surprisingly, the quality of their work was pretty greatly improved. That's my life. By the mid-17th century, there were over 300 coffee houses in London, many of which attracted very like-minded patrons, including merchants, shippers, brokers, artisans, whatever it may be. And many businesses actually grew out of these specialized coffee houses. So Lloyd's of London, for example, came into existence at Edward Lloyd's Coffee House. Now, in the mid-1600s, coffee was brought to New Amsterdam, later called New York by the British. And though coffee houses repeatedly began to appear, tea companies continued to be the favored folks in the area. So tea was the favored drink in the New World until about 1773, which is when the colonists revolted against a heavy tax on tea imposed by King George III. Now that revolt, known as the British Tea Party, actually changed forever the American drinking preference to coffee. As demand for that beverage continued to spread, there was very fierce competition to cultivate coffee outside of Arabia. So the Dutch finally got seedlings in the latter half of the 17th century, and their first attempts to plant them in India completely failed. But they were successful in their attempts to plant coffee in Batavia, I think it's Batavia, on the island of Java in what is now Indonesia. So the plants actually thrived there, and soon the Dutch had a productive and growing trade in coffee. They then expanded the cultivation of coffee trees to the islands of Sumatra and Celebes. And in 1714, the mayor of Amsterdam presented a gift of a young coffee plant to King Louis XIV of France. Now, the king ordered it to be planted in the Royal Botanical Garden in Paris, and in 1723, a young naval officer, Gabriel Declus, obtained a seedling from the king's plant. And despite a challenging voyage, complete with horrendous weather, a saboteur who tried to destroy the seedling, and a pirate attack, that is probably a fact of the day for another day, because that voyage in itself sounds just juicy. He actually managed to transport the seedling from the king's plant all the way back to his home in Martinique. Now, once it was planted, the seedling not only thrived, but it's credited with the spread of over 18 million coffee trees on the island of Martinique within the next 50 years. Even more incredible is that the seedling was the parent of all coffee trees throughout the Caribbean, the South, and Central Americas. So the famed Brazilian coffee owes its existence to Francisco de Melo Peleda, I think is his name, I probably butchered that too, who was sent by the emperor to French Guinea to get the coffee seedlings. And the French were not willing to travel to share, but the French's governor's wife, captivated by his very good looks, gave him a large bouquet of flowers before he left, and buried inside were enough coffee seeds to begin what is today a multi-billion-dollar industry. Now, missionaries and travelers, traders, colonists, they continued to carry coffee seeds to new lands, and coffee trees were planted worldwide. Plantations were established in magnificent tropical forests and on rugged mountain highlands. Some crops flourished, some crops were pretty short-lived, but they were everywhere. New nations were established on coffee economies only. That is how big of a commodity it is. Entire new nations were founded on coffee economies. Fortunes were made, fortunes were lost. By the end of the 18th century, coffee had become one of the world's most profitable export crops, and after crude oil, coffee is still the most sought-after commodity in the world. So, to you coffee drinkers out there, like me, a little appreciation for the history of the beverage that you like to consume. For those of you who dislike coffee, a little history to help you understand why we love it so much. It's in our blood. It's in our blood. Anyway, I hope you guys are well. I hope you're having a good one. I hope that you are not pulling your hair out like I am today, because goodness gracious, what a day. And I hope you all have a very happy Easter. I will try to get a video out tomorrow, but my children do not have school tomorrow, which means I gotta entertain them even more. I can't just put them in front of schoolwork, so we'll see how that goes. But worst case scenario, I will get a new one out on Monday. And again, I hope you all have a very happy Easter, but a safe Easter. Wash your hands, don't lick your friends.